Hello. Okay, I am talking. Great. Hello, everybody. We are here. So today we are looking at Amoris Laetitia, or the joy of love. So let's begin, as we do all things, let's begin with a prayer. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Heavenly Father, we give you thanks for all the blessings that you have given us. We thank you for allowing to participate in this joy of love. And we ask that you would open up our hearts and our minds to receive what you would speak to us today. Help guide the presentation, guide our conversation. Help us to know that you are the God of love. We ask this through Christ our Lord. Amen. Amen. Okay, so today we are talking about Amoris Laetitia. I'm so glad to have my mouse working out to this. That's so exciting. It's the little things, I tell you. This looks like I could push play, but I can't. It's just a screenshot. So Bishop Barron has a great kind of introduction to Amoris Laetitia. It is, how long is it? 9 minutes. So I recommend that presentation as well. It's a very nice introduction talking about Pope Francis's approach through mercy. It's a beautiful look at the document, and it's his perspective is like very fresh. He's given some other videos as well on this. I was just watching something else on chapter 7 of Amoris Laetitia, but it's a really nice breakdown if you want to have another kind of viewpoint on Amoris Laetitia. So let's get to the Amoris Laetitia basics. Unlike the other ones that we've looked at, this is not an encyclical, but it's an apostolic exhortation. So it carries a little bit less authority, I suppose, than an encyclical. What happened is in 2014, 2015, there were some synods on the family. And this is a summary of what was discussed at the synod, at the two synods. So he's really listening. That's why I've got this listening Pope Francis here. Listening to what was happening, what's the state of the family in the world, and trying to come up with a response and kind of a way forward. So sometimes these documents can be kind of dry, but I don't find this one to be really dry at all. Pope Francis has a nice writing style. I think it's very, very engaging, and he can really draw you in. But it's not meeting minutes, but it's the summary and synthesis of what has happened, and then processing and him proposing a way forward. As he says in the introduction, that this is, he's not making any like canonical changes or anything. He said it was illuminating, but it's not for, it's for consideration and for ways to go forward. More of the basics about this document. It's 8 chapters long. It's pretty thick. It's some good hearty reading. How many pages is my book here? 200 some pages. So it's kind of a light read, but it's not a short read by any means. I don't know how it compares to Laudato Si. It's a little bit longer, I think. I think it's getting longer and longer. Actually, I think Fratelli Tutti is longer than that. So it's addressing issues. So the theme is addressing issues of love within the family. Unlike Laudato Si, it is addressed to all Christians. Laudato Si was addressed to the entire world. This is how it says. It says, to bishops, priests, deacons, consecrated persons, Christian married couples, and all the lay faithful. So it's really addressed to all Christians. He's not really talking to the world, and really probably even just Catholics is his focus here this time around. It's arguably more practical than Laudato Si. It depends on how you look at things, but if reading Laudato Si, it's a lot of what do nations need to do? What needs to happen on a higher level? This is a much more practical level. What can you do in the family? Now, there were some very practical pieces of Laudato Si, which I talked about 2 weeks ago with, recycling and carpooling and those kind of things. Those were very practical, but a lot of those things, it's like, yeah, I don't know how to stop carbon emissions or whatever, that's a step beyond me. Practical to read, a little bit harder to put into practice. So it's arguably more practical even than Laudato Si. He kind of has an introduction here in paragraph 7, is to not have a rushed reading of the text. Now, I've had 2 weeks basically to read the text and to prepare a presentation, so it's semi-rushed. But I had to get the presentation ready for this. And Fratelli Tutti will be even more rushed, because I'll tell you, I haven't started it yet, because I had to focus on this. I don't want to get, that's my general practice, is I don't want to get confused. Like, was that in Fratelli Tutti or was that in that? So I tried to just keep them separate, and then I'll start Fratelli Tutti tonight to work on that one. But he does say to read each part patiently and carefully. So I really want to go back and do some rereading. I've read it probably a time and a half. There's several sections I've read a few times. But it's really meant to be a document to consider, to pray over. There's lots of things that I want to put into practice. Sometimes we look at the church, and we sometimes are kind of reinventing the wheel, it seems like. And it's like, read the documents here. There's lots of guides here. This is what you can do. Here are some ways to improve things with the family. So I hope to do some more with this. I'm planning to do and maybe I'll do one in English as well, but I do feel like I'm cheating the Spanish community a little bit, because I'm not doing these in Spanish yet. Like I did the Bible studies, I was doing those in English and Spanish, but it was already a lot to get into English and try to process that through. So I want to get the English piece done and then work on the Spanish piece later. But what I said is, at the very least, what I'm planning to do for the Spanish community is to look at chapters 4 and 5, as he talks about those are married couples should be more concerned with chapters 4 and 5. And I'd like to do kind of a more in-depth focus in on those chapters 4 and 5. I can do that in English community too, but I'll probably start with the Spanish, and then the English community can say, "You're cheating us. Why are you doing this for us?" And so what goes around comes around. So this is what we got for the English community. And then I'll try to do something to say, we did a leadership session, Good Leaders, Good Shepherds. And there were different things and as you were organized in different generations, those were things that generations tend to be passionate about. And I'm kind of passionate about justice and equality. I'm always looking about how do we keep everything just, fair, equal, and everything? So I'm always trying to think about those kinds of things. That's just kind of one of my places that I come out of is, okay, yeah, but what about them? Yeah, but what about them? And really this document, I think, Amoris Laetitia is really, it's a justice document, right? So I think Pope Francis is asking the question, what about them? And what about them? So I resonate with that. It's time for a nap, it sounds like. So so Pope Francis says, I'm going to talk about married couples, but I also want to talk about, not everyone fits into this idea of what the perfect married, nobody fits into that idea. So he's trying to really reach out and speak to everybody. So that's kind of a basic. It is beautiful. I do recommend reading it. I don't recommend rushing through it, as the Pope does not recommend either. So here are the 8, I said 8 chapters. It's 9 chapters. I messed up. The 9th chapter is very short, so that's why I forgot about that one. But the spirituality of marriage and family, it's about prayer in the community. And I don't want to dismiss prayer or whatever, but it's a very short chapter kind of at the end. And really, when you talk about Amoris Laetitia or Laetitia, the chapter that most people talk about is chapter 8, guiding, discerning, and integrating weakness. That's the one that there is the most discussion about, there's the most confusion about. And Bishop Barron says that's not where you should start with the document. And I would agree with him. However, I'm going to start with the document. Just to get it out of the way, so we don't have to like wait, and because I'm not going to go through like chapters 1 through 9. I'm going to kind of be all over the place. But I thought, let's start with the one that everyone talks about, get that out of the way, and then go back and talk about some of the other pieces. So if you've heard one thing about Amoris Laetitia, you've probably heard about chapter 8. There's also some discussion, which is very interesting as I was doing my research this week, is about a couple of footnotes that have caused people to get all up in ruffles about the documents about communion and stuff. So there's a couple of footnotes in there that people freaked out about. So I'm going to start off with chapter 8. I'm going to start off with the difficult stuff, and then get to the not easy stuff, the more beautiful stuff, right? Start with the difficult stuff so that we end with all this beauty that Pope Francis wants to talk about, rather than doing beauty, and then things. It makes sense for the document. Let's talk about the beauty, and let's talk about all these other ways that things can fall short and can be difficult. But we're just going to start off with chapter 8. So in chapter 8, as he says, he wants everyone to, he thinks everyone should be the married couple should be interested in 4 and 5, pastoral ministers, perhaps with chapter 6, and everyone be challenged by chapter 8. And so he recognizes that chapter 8 is about some challenges that we face in our world. It's a beautiful chapter. It's really good. But what he's talking about is what's the controversial chapter. He's talking about some irregular situations. Now, I like this paragraph 292. It's like he's saying all this just to be clear. It's like, I think it's a big old long run-on sentence. It sounds like, okay, just so we know, Christian marriage is a reflection of the union between Christ and his church, fully recognized in the union of man and woman who give themselves exclusively to a free, faithful excuse of love, belong to each other till death, open to the transmission of life, and are consecrated by the sacrament, which grants them the grace to become a domestic church and the leaven of new life for the society. Yes, we've talked about it. However, that's what it feels like, right? There are, what he says, irregular situations. And chapter 8 deals with those folks with irregular situations. In chapter 294, for instance, he talks about sometimes celebrating marriage is considered too expensive in the social circumstances. And that happens actually quite a bit. It's a lot more common in the Hispanic community that people get married civilly and then they don't get married through the church. And I've been in Hispanic ministry now since 2009, so about 12 years or so. And I still can't wrap my head around. All of the reasons are very complicated. And some of the reasons are they are in this country and they have found someone else. They found a companion that gets them through, but they're not sure if they really want a lifetime commitment to this, but it's good for now. And they're thinking sometimes, is this something that I really want to commit? They wouldn't say it in so many words, right? But they're in difficult situations because they're in a strange country with a lot of strangers and they have someone to be there and support them. And they like that. There's a lot of things that they don't like about this person, but this is what I can do for now, right? And so there's I've heard that, some hesitation that they really have some struggles there. Some, it's interesting, I have heard that, and it blows my mind, but they say that if they get married in the church, then God will have more demands on them. And so they don't want to do that because it's going to be too hard then. And to say nothing of the grace of marriage, but God's going to make demands on them. And so that's another piece that sometimes comes up. Sometimes often the woman wants to get married in the church, but the man does not. That's another problem that I have often. I've talked to many, many groups and I'm saying, let's get your marriage regularized. If you've got to work on an annulment, let's get it taken care of. Let's do these things. Let's get you because they're sitting there in church and they're not coming to communion. And it's like, how can we get this fixed? And I was like, let's get you married. And I was talking about how, and I'm talking to a group of women at the School of Religion because the parents were required to come. Who comes? The moms do. A couple of dads, but the moms are coming, right? And I say, let's get this regularized. And I said, but we need to have the guys on board. And I see all the heads. Yes, we do. So it's frustrating. So there's all these irregular situations of why people are not getting married in the church. So he spends a lot of time talking about people who are civilly married, but not married in the church, and where are the avenues of grace for them. So that's one of the irregular situations. So that sometimes money, it's sometimes other aspects. He reminds, one of his favorite phrases is the church is as a field hospital, right? So we're ministering to grace for people out there, and we're all hit up with all kinds of things and beat up, and these wounds that we have in our lives and whatever, and we need to go out and heal the wounds. And so how do we offer grace to those who are in these irregular situations? He has this phrase, which Bishop Barron also mentions in his little video. He talks about the law of gradualness. And he makes a clarification. It's not about there's the law gets graded, graded, whatever. But rather that people get introduced to the fullness of the law gradually. One of my favorite ideas of Bishop Barron, some people, I love Bishop Barron, I think he's great. Some people have trouble with him because he leads with a different foot, a different path forward. So in the transcendentals, if we talk about beauty, truth, and goodness, most conversation in Catholicism and evangelization deals with the transcendental of truth, right? I'm going to teach you the truth, you're going to know it, and the truth will set you free, and we'll do all that. Bishop Barron says, I lead with beauty, not truth. Not that he's ignoring truth, but what his phrase is, he says, he talks about baseball sometimes. And he says that what I want people to do with Catholicism is I want people to get the smell of the grass and hear the crack of the bat and see the beauty of pitching and stuff. I'd rather start with that rather than the infield fly rule, right? Because although that's true, it's not particularly helpful for the beauty of what the game is. If we boil it all down to the infield fly rule, we don't see the beauty of what this is of marriage. And so I am starting with the infield fly rule, I recognize here with chapter 8, and the beauty is first. Pope Francis goes with the beauty, and then he talks about these infield fly rules or whatever. But we get gradually introduced to the law. You don't throw everything at people at first. You introduce them first to the beauty of who God is, that God loves them and all those things. And then they get introduced, and then they are more open to hear those more challenging pieces of the law, but you don't necessarily start with them, despite what I'm doing right now. So that's another thing that he mentions. And then he talks about, he particularly talks about the mercy of God and the aspects of justice and mercy. And he's encouraging pastoral ministers to really listen to people's stories and hear where people are, and not all situations are the same. And in the document, the people get all up in a tiffy about communion for those who are divorced and remarried without an annulment. So they have been married outside the church. Can they present themselves for communion? And Pope Francis does not say that that they can. He does not say that. The footnotes kind of sometimes might imply that, but he does not say that. And he also has not clarified particularly that. But in the document, he talks about being involved and participating in the life of the church. And that's what he's getting at, that they should be invited to, though all those that have these complicated and irregular situations should be invited to participate in the life of the church. And I might have been mentioning last time, but someone mentioned, this is helpful for me, is that the Pope does generally not write with the United States in mind. We are not the target audience. There's a lot of world out there, and we sometimes think we're the center of it, and we're not. And so people sometimes think, well, because of our experience of these things, he's talking about this and making excuses for all these things, but he's not. There was another video from Catholic Answers, someone was calling in about this footnote about divorce and remarried and receiving communion. And he was saying, look, he's making some changes, but not like a profound, like theological change or something. Some people are calling Pope Francis a heretic or whatever. And he says, no, he's not. He's saying there are particular situations, and let me get into this first here. So before I get too far ahead of myself, this is basic moral theology, which I presume that you all know, but let's just back up for a second. There are two realms of morality, right? You've got the objective realm of morality, and which is where good and evil reside. And then there's subjective realm of morality, what I know to be good and evil, and how I am reacting to that. So the subjective realm of morality is where sin lies, not in the objective realm. It's in the subjective realm. So sin is intentionally choosing to do what you know to be wrong, right? So, and there is a lot of, and a mortal sin is intentionally choosing to do what you know to be seriously wrong. So someone who intentionally chooses to do something that they know to be seriously wrong, you're in a state of mortal sin, and then you really shouldn't be presenting yourself for communion before you go to confession to heal for that mortal sin. So, but our intentions, our wills can be quite compromised depending on the situation. So in this Catholic Answers video that I was watching on YouTube about this question, about this paragraph, he uses the example of, let's say, the situation, remember Pope Francis is from Argentina, and he was using this example of, let's say there's a woman, a very poor woman in Brazil, she gets married, and then they have two kids together, the husband leaves her. Then she's destitute, she's desperate for someone to help support her children, so she marries somebody else. Again, maybe not her first choice or whatever. And they have 3 more children together. Then she comes back to the faith after being away from the faith, perhaps. Again, this is a hypothetical situation. And then she has these 5 children. And then the idea is that if you are living in a marriage that is not regular, the idea is that you live as brother and sister, right? You live in that perfect continence. Well, let's say the husband has not come back to the faith, and the husband says, I'm not on board with this continence thing. No way. So then what happens to that woman? Could there be a possibility for her to come to communion? Not because of the objective realm has changed, but the subjective realm has changed, because she is living in fear and she is living with her will compromised. All things being equal, she would like to get married in the church, perhaps. She would like to live in continence. She would like to live in as a brother and sister or whatever, but she is not able to because of the situation that is there. That is what Pope Francis is talking about, particularly as those kinds of situations, that there might be some of these pastoral situations that need to be addressed with love, with mercy. It's not an open invitation to say, okay, everybody come on in. That's not what Pope Francis is saying. He's saying, let's take each situation and look at each situation because they're complicated. Let's look with mercy, not changing the objective realm. And whatever we feel about that, that's just what the church teaches, right? That's the objective realm of morality. But we need to take into account the person and the particular situations. Yes.
I know personally a situation similar.
Uh-huh.
I think God knows the heart of the person.
Sure.
And he's the ultimate judge.
Sure.
And this person longs so much to be continuing in her Catholic faith and receiving communion.
Yep.
She longed for it. She felt this was where her strength was to endure the
Yep.
challenges, the moral challenges, and other challenges in her life. And they were great. And so even though she was not married in the church with her second husband, she went to communion because she said, I need this spiritually. I didn't judge her. I felt that this made her a better person. God was the ultimate judge. God was the ultimate judge. Not
Right.
me.
Right. Exactly. So God is the judge on those situations. We can't change the objective realm of morality, right? But we just And that's where he encourages the pastors and to happen like in confession or whatever and not even necessarily pastors, but good spiritual leaders that understand these nuances, that it is not what he's stressing. It's not for the general population to have this person, wear the scarlet A on his or her shirt and just make sure that everyone makes her feel real bad when she comes to church. Right. Right. It's not our place to judge. Now, it's possible also that person, not this particular person, but any person, that it's possible that person should still abstain from communion because it could cause scandal, right? And so we want to take into account other people's weaknesses. Paul says that too. If eating meat sacrificed to idols causes people to sin, fine, then I won't eat it, right? I kind of have a policy generally. Okay, I'm going to say this live on YouTube and Facebook. I sometimes like having a beer or a wine or something, but sometimes, especially with youth, they get confused because they've had these, don't drink programs or whatever. And like, well, Father's having a beer, I guess it's okay or whatever. So that could cause scandal. Not that having a beer is scandalous. I'm way over 21. And to drink with moderation, that's perfectly fine. But if that's going to cause somebody scandal, then I'm not going to have a beer. It's not worth it, because then if that's going to put them all in a tizzy to saying, well, I guess if the priest has beer, then I guess whatever he says up at he's a hypocrite, he's whatever. So I won't have the Oktoberfest. It's fine, So that could be an occasion to not go to communion, not because she doesn't feel like she should, but it could cause some scandal for others. And that's not fair that they're judging her, but we take that into account too.
I think people who were in her circle or in her family knew who she was.
Yeah.
The goodness
right.
of her soul.
Right.
I don't think there was any judgment.
Right. The other thing is too, you're supposed to fast for an hour before Mass. I remember before you receive communion, rather. And I remember I was kind of scandalized when I saw Father Mick when I was a kid coming in at Christ the King, coming in and drinking a Diet Coke before Mass. I'm like, now, wait a minute. However, I didn't know that if you've already had your first Mass, you can have something to sustain you for the next Mass. But I try to keep that in mind, that like if I'm walking to the sacristy, even if I've already had another Mass, I try not to eat anything or drink anything because it would cause scandal, even though I know the law says I can have something to sustain me if this is my second or third or fourth Mass. The law makes room for that, but people don't know that, and it can cause scandal. And I know that I was kind of scandalized when I saw Father Mick drinking his Diet Coke before Mass. I'm like, I'm told you can't have anything before Mass. So, don't you know anything, Father Mick? So if you take out then this whole objective realm, then you're down to subjectivism. And the church clearly does not teach subjectivism. Whatever you think is fine. That's not what the church teaches. God has come to show us the way, right? Okay. That much clear? So there's a few more little, I think, passages that are worth noting again in this challenging area, talking about there is such thing as objective sin, objective evil might be a more precise term, but if someone knows something and they promote it and flaunt it, obviously that's problematic, right? We teach against this, take your worst example of sin. He has some really challenging, good words, I think, to say to those who are divorced and remarried, and I'm happy that our Pope is saying this. They should ask themselves how did they act and what were they doing, and what example are they setting? Because there are a lot of people. He does talk about divorce is evil. I mean, we all agree with that. There are reasons that people need to separate. That's true, but it's not. Nobody ever comes into marriage saying we're going to be married for a couple of years, and then we're going to divorce. I'm going to marry somebody else. Nobody ever plans on that. The plan is always for, at least in my experience, in the Catholic Church, fidelity for life.
Did you just not say that the Hispanic community will get married legally, but not within the church for exactly that reason? Because they're not sure that second husband is the one they stay with?
Oh, I did say that, yes. But they're also not coming into my office and saying we'd like to get married.
Well, yes. My point being that it's complicated. Very, very complicated.
It is complicated. That's true. But he does say, I think it's good because sometimes people just think that there's no harm in divorce or whatever, or I'm going to get a divorce and I can do this and I'm free to do this and no harm done or whatever. And it's like, no, it's not that easy. We need to come back, and there's a lot of, did you try to reconcile? What was your behavior like? Doing some examinations of conscience is very important for anyone that is divorced and trying to remarry. It's fractured many families. It's been very difficult, and he's saying, you need to be thinking about these things. It's a beautiful. I don't think many documents have really addressed divorced people precisely. Sometimes it's like just cast off. It's like, okay, well, you sinned, you're out. No, he says, okay, let's find this path forward to the future and to holiness. I haven't really read, and maybe years ago I read Familiaris Consortio, which a lot of this is based on. And actually, Father Ashmore, when I was saying I was doing this, he says, I need to read it more clearly or do it a second time or whatever, because I couldn't figure out what this offered that Familiaris Consortio didn't offer, which is the document from the 1980s or so. So, and I'm not sure. I haven't read that. So it's possible a lot of this is kind of rehashing of things that were already said 30 years ago or whatever, 40 years ago. And so sometimes we think, oh, Pope Francis, he got all these new things. And I kind of like that perspective, actually, is we've been saying these things for a long time. So maybe in Familiaris Consortio, we'd already been talking about the divorce and what they need to be doing and stuff. So nothing new under the sun. And then like also in this thing of 308, I think that, I'm not sure it was for this, but I remember that my mom wrote the bishop because the bishop was asking for input to send to Rome. And maybe you recall that as well. We want to know what's happening in marriage and everything. And I know that my mom wrote a fairly lengthy letter to the bishop or to whoever was gathering this information to let her point of view be known. And she would prefer a more rigorous pastoral care, which leaves no room for confusion. So I get that he's addressing people like my mom, who says, I understand you would like us to be clearer about this, but I sincerely believe that this is the way forward. So I appreciate that as a pastor as well, because I know that not everyone agrees with me or what we do at our church or whatever. And people would say, when we're talking about masks or whatever, I would prefer if you would be much more clear and say everybody in a mask and just do it. Or someone says, I would prefer you say nobody in masks or whatever, because whatever. I prefer that you'd be more clear. And I'd say, I'm not sure if that's the way forward here. Let's let people make their own decisions here. So I appreciate that as a pastor. They says, I hear you. I know that you want this. I don't think this is good for our church. So, because I've had to do that as a pastor as well. I know that this is what you want. I know you'd like us to go this way. This is not what I feel is the best for our church. Consulting with various people, because nobody's going to have the exact same ideas of how we should run things. Okay, so here again, here's the chapter. Any questions? Clear? I might get too sidetracked, but
I just had a comment
yeah.
about Hispanic people. A lot of times too, we don't know what their experience has been in their homeland, because I'm thinking of our El Salvador committee, and when I had been down there, it's just like 30 years ago, or however long it's been, 25. There was a group called Mothers of the Disappeared, where their sons and their spouses were killed or kidnapped, or
Sure.
so they don't know if their previous spouse is even alive. The status.
Sure, right. So that's another piece that could be,
A
Well,
difficult
yeah,
situation.
with people not knowing if their spouses are alive. Yeah. Dorothy, do you have
Oh,
something?
that's okay. I kind of lost my train of thought.
Okay, maybe the train will come back. Okay, so chapter 8 is challenging. Chapter 6 also has some challenging things in there as well. And so I just want to mention a few things here, because especially in our day and age, we talk about like homosexuality and homosexual unions or whatever. And he addresses this. He says, we would like to say that every person, regardless, dignity and everything, quoting the catechism. But he also talks about the homosexual unions, and people get confused about this as well, is that there is this document, and that's really, it'd have to be a major change in church teaching to say that there is anything analogous to marriage of a homosexual unions for many reasons. So he does address that, just in case there was confusion or question about that. It does not say, okay, because there is, like in the German bishops, I think they're trying to do these things with blessing unions or whatever. And he says, we don't see anything. The Synod Fathers say we don't see any way forward for that. So that's where it came out from Amoris Laetitia.
My thought is that someone I care a great deal about had a nice conversation with recently. She left the Catholic Church because of some of these issues. The church is standing, and I tried to explain to her, I don't think you understand church's position on these issues.
Mhm.
And I said, I just told her, I said, for me, the most important thing is incorporating the sacraments in my life.
Mhm.
And I get this through the Catholic Church. I didn't get it through my other faith, like I do through the Catholic Church. And so I led her to the Divine Mercy Chapter, and she wasn't familiar with it. I said, just get it and pray it
Mhm.
and ask God's guidance, because I want her back in the church.
Yeah.
I want her next to me.
Yeah.
Singing next to me. And a few other people who are not inquired for various reasons. Some of them have left the church.
Mhm.
I want these people back. They're my brothers and sisters.
Yeah. Right.
And to me, the sacraments are our channel for salvation. And this is what the church offers. And I said to her, I have never felt condemnation for someone's sexuality through the church, maybe through individuals, but not through the church. I felt the church tells us to love. And I said, we all had experience. We all have had to learn to love family members and friends who may be different than us in some expressions. But what we need to incorporate is our love for them. Take them where they're at and just love them where they're at. Because, Jesus went into the tax collector's home and he was condemned for that, but he went in and was with them. He integrated himself in them so they could feel his spirit. And I think that that's what we're called, is for people to feel our spirit of love and accept people for where they're at, because we all have our challenges. We all, and that's what I told her. I said, we are all sinners working toward heaven and believing in the gift of heaven. I said, some of us may be purified through purgatory. And I brought that subject up because I remember when Ashmore had talk on it, and I saw someone walk out and talk with all of it. Some people can't accept these realities, but they are there.
Right.
And it is something that we need to realize, that our own purification can be here on earth maybe, or after death. And when someone passes away, I just simply say, I'm praying for their journey to God, because I don't believe it ends when we die. I think we have a spirit that can commune with God. And I just believe that. I think that's part of the church.
Yes. And you're really speaking from the heart of Pope Francis there as well, that and from St. Paul and from our tradition, that all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. And that's the whole thing, is he's looking for ways forward for all people, including those who are in homosexual unions. Where's the way of grace? Where can they participate in the church? And all those things. Those are aspects that we need to consider.
Okay, this is the pastoral perspectives. Is the Pope saying to you as a priest and to all of the other priests, you do not give communion to someone who is without the realm of grace, like a homosexual, like two people are living together in sin, and so on and so forth, like women who are taking birth control? Do you as priests have the responsibility to say, no, I can't give you communion, or can those people decide it's between them and God and come to you to take communion with clear conscience? Generally,
I was taught that you don't deny anybody communion. If they present somebody for communion, you never deny them, and you trust their conscience, right? Now, but
Well, Father, I know a couple. Her husband was Lutheran, and he came up to receive communion.
Mhm.
I'm not there to judge him.
Mhm.
You know, if he believes that this is the body and blood of Christ, who am I to judge him? Even though he wasn't Catholic, I'm not going to condemn him. This
Sure.
has to come within himself.
Sure, but he also needs to understand the objective realm as well. And so I would say,
And you bring it up at funerals, you know, you let people know in a very kind way. But if he determined that he wanted to receive the communion, I'm not gonna.
well, sure. And in that instance, I would not deny him, but then I would say to him, I saw that you came up to communion today. Are you ready to become Catholic?
Yeah,
And then I'd like to have a conversation with him, because
yeah, and that's good.
and what is holding you back? And if there is something, so that we should have that conversation.
And I think that that's good. I mean, you didn't deny him, but then you did offer him the grace of receiving the church, you know, legitimately.
Right. If they don't want to go through a year long, if the hell is I can't make classes on Wednesday, well, okay, let's find something else. Yeah. Let's move on here, because we're going to get too far afield, and we haven't even got to the good stuff yet, and we're like 10 minutes away. So let's get to some more pastoral perspectives here happen in chapter 6. So marriage preparation. Here's a picture which they're covered up. That's right. Nope. This feels like one of those things that you see on the like, we will take out their identity, black out their eyes. So anyway, that's Garrett and Leilani, who I'm meeting with today. I take a picture of the couples as I meet with them. So again, United States is not the target audience, I don't think. A lot of these things we already do, talking about marriage preparation, but some countries still are a little behind of talking about all the various, I see your mental health awareness, talking about the various wounds that people are coming from and taking all that into account. Some places around the world are not doing that yet. And so this is kind of hey, we need to take into all these accounts and maturity levels as people are entering into marriage and everything. So, which we have maturity problems here in the United States as well, but we have a pretty relatively good marriage preparation program, I think. So then there's, what does it look like in the first few years of marriage? I really like this phrase that he says, each marriage is a kind of salvation history, which is beautiful. That in other times we might say that spouse, or still currently, the spouse's main role is to get each other to heaven, so to help rub out the rough edges that are there in marriage and to help each other to grow in holiness. And so that's what a beautiful way to look at that, is a sort of miniature salvation history. So this was talking about acknowledging psychological concerns and past hurts. Where are people coming from? We need to keep all these things in mind. And I can't go into all these things. Read chapter 6 if you want to know more about these things. He talks about crises and divorces and how that affects marriage. Just again, this is just an example, I think, of it's very easy to read and quite clear. Little by little, the person I love slowly becomes my mate, then just the father and mother of my children, and then finally a stranger. And that's a tragedy, right? And so, but that's just a nice way to put it still, though, is this was the person that I loved, and then it wasn't, and then further and further away. I think of C.S. Lewis and The Great Divorce, which is not about divorce at all. It's a terrible title, perhaps. It's a play on on another title. No, something about the great marriage or the great engagement or something like that. It's the great, I forget, it's a play on words from a previous thing, but now I forget what that is. And so is everybody else. So they see the book on the shelf saying The Great Divorce. I'm like, why would I read about the Great Divorce? But it's about the separation of hell, right? And that's a beautiful image of hell, is, if there could be such a thing, but hell is people go to hell and they build a house, but then they're too close to other people. So then they build a house further away, and then they're still too close to each other, and they build further away, and then they build further away. And that's what hell is. It's complete separation from not only God, but from each other. And we just get lost in our own thing. So that separation. And so we want to come back there. And then I think this is also beautiful. I mean, again, very practical. I think this first part comes from from a homily, never ever take your child hostage. You separated for many reasons and problems. He's acknowledging all that. But your children shouldn't have to bear this burden. So buckle up, guys. Treat your children well. Who was it that sang that?
Yes.
Who was it? Teach your children well. Your father's hell, you slow blind. And then it talks about even like the death of a spouse. So that chapter 6 talks about all those pastoral perspectives. While we're in the challenging things, chapter 2, I'm going to skip through this because I still need to get to good stuff here. But there are some experiences and challenges that we have in a family, and he acknowledges there's extreme individualism going on. Realism, the church hasn't always been there and have provided the best guidance for marriage. Commitment, fears of commitment, pressures not to start a family, the weakening of faith and religious practices. So really, you get the sense that he's really listening, and here's what's happening around the world. And these are things that we need to address. So I like how he really lays all that out there in chapter 2.
Does the overall world church have an enrollment process, or is that?
Yeah.
So no, that's it.
I'm sorry.
That's a church.
It is. When did it begin?
I don't know, but I know when I worked for the church, I handled some nuns.
Yeah. However, the United States has way more enrollments than just about anybody else. So that's, again, it's not addressing us but it's addressing some of these other countries that still haven't, they still say, sorry, you got married. There's no way out. You're done.
It's a nice way that the church has come up with to kind of rationalize these things and make people feel better about themselves.
Sure. That's one way of putting it. It's a healing process. Yeah. Right.
I just was wondering when it began, because early church was so different. The women had roles, and then could be priests years and years and years and years. But not nonsense about the year 300. A lot of things have changed over the years,
Sure.
and I just wondered whether or not that was a new addition to the church's mercy on people. So to speak.
Yeah, although I wasn't, I think we've always had annulments, just haven't been as or for a long time, because wasn't Henry VIII that wanted an annulment, and the church didn't grant
Which is
it?
why he broke away from the church. by the way.
Why we have Anglican church.
Well, right. Yes, exactly. It was like, let's not do that again. But
There is that.
But the reasons for qualifying for annulment are really pretty significant.
they are.
It just acknowledges that things can go wrong. And some people enter into it without having full commitment.
Right. And so, the annulment isn't just a Catholic divorce. And that's the other thing, is judgment call, right? A divorce is you apply for one, you get one. An annulment is you can apply for one, but then they do need to judge, not the people, but the situations, and say, is there a reason to say that this marriage was null? And I don't know what Henry VIII, the decision might have been the same too. There are some times that you enter into a marriage and there is no grounds for an annulment. And sometimes they come back and say, I hear you, but I don't see anything that would make this marriage null. It was a valid marriage that fell apart. And you need to work on reconciliation or something there. But we see here with the evidence that's presented to us, we don't feel that we can make with good conscience a decision of annulment.
Henry VIII just wanted a son, right?
I don't recall.
That was part of it, and his wife.
I think that's right.
So,
And which was ironic because it was his fault, but he's the one that has the Y chromosome. But always blame the women. It's always their fault. All right, so now let's move on to finally some more beautiful stuff here. So love and marriage. Love and marriage, love and marriage. If you read nothing else from Amoris Laetitia, this is the chapter you should read, chapter 4. It's possibly the crown jewel of the document. There are 30 paragraphs spent meditating on the famous hymn to love. Love is patient, love is kind. Beautifully, talks about the Greek origin of the word and what that means, and then practically dissects each one of those. It's beautiful. Dan Morrow, who was our seminarian, he was there this summer. he's back for a weekend to summer break, so he's just staying at the rectory. And he's not doing anything. He's on break, and so he's just having fun with family or whatever. But I saw him last night, and I was saying that I was doing this thing. He said, "Yeah, that piece on the Corinthians, that is spectacular." I'm like, "Yeah, it is. It's beautiful." So this is something that this is one of those chapters 4 and 5 are what I want to talk about to break down more, because this is the real practical, how are we putting this into play stuff. So read chapter 4 of Amoris Laetitia. It's beautiful. 5 paragraphs doesn't sound like much, but so I'm not comparing like, oh, 30 is on this and 5 is on this. No, 5 whole paragraphs are spent on dialogue. My parents used to do something called dialoguing. I think it was a marriage encounter thing, and they would dialogue and they'd write to each other every night. And I always heard about their dialogue, and they did it for like 20, 30 years or something. They had spiral notebooks they dialogue. And just really practical, right? Take time, quality time, being ready to listen patiently and attentive to everything the other person has to say. Self-discipline, not speaking. Practical stuff. Part of you says, duh, but also, I think lots of couples don't do this as well. They don't take the discipline and not listening to each other, and they don't take time with each other. And so to do marriage enrichment, you could base a whole retreat on this chapter 4. And then the story of this couple here, Nick and Adriana, they got married, and I love, it's happened only a couple of times, but they wanted to be Eucharistic ministers for their wedding, which I think is just beautiful, right? So it's not about us, then we serve, right? And so there they are giving out Holy Communion, which I think is just beautiful. Whenever a couple ask me, like, yes, absolutely. But it's pretty rare that I have a couple that's actually like Eucharistic ministers. So I could train them to be that, but not every couple is interested in doing that. But I think it's just a great symbol of, we are not just here for ourselves, but we are called for the world and the community. And so they were Eucharistic ministers at their wedding. And I just kind of stood back and watched. 15 paragraphs on passions, which includes talking about erotic love, but also violence and manipulation. And so passions are good and passions are bad sometimes. So he goes into all those things, and violence that happens within families and everything. And so it's quite beautiful and also challenging. And it's very honest and real, this is just a great, great chapter. So love and marriage. So you've got love and marriage, and then if you've got love and marriage, and you've got love made fruitful. So we'll go into love made fruitful, love and marriage. Love. So married with children. I never watched this show, but I think it looked right. So we'll kick them out and put that in instead. So here is Joe and Kathleen, and I just love this picture. And this is husband and wife, mother and father show their children the maternal and paternal face of the Lord. I think that's pretty sacramental right there. There's the face of God, just looking with joy and love at their child, and how wonderful this is. So it's a beautiful image of, that's what love, family, God should be. I think it's beautiful there. He talks to mothers particularly. He talks to fathers particularly as well. And I like the way, that he acknowledges, that's good that women want to have desires to be out in the workforce and all those things at the same time. If you are called to marriage, and I stress to marriage couples all the time, your primary vocation is wife. Your second vocation is mother. Your third vocation or third piece or third priority or whatever is your work or other. That's way down the line. Family, extended family, all those kinds of things. Then way down the line is work. And I say that to fathers too. Your primary vocation, if you choose to get married, your primary vocation is being a good husband. Your second piece is being a good father. then family, then all those other things, then being a good worker or whatever. And we want to be responsible workers, but people get those confused all the time. And they think often in our society, people want to do both. I want to be a great worker and I want to be a great wife or a great father or whatever. I said, nope. First things first, be good in your family. Then everything follows. So, and that's what he's talking about as well. So people don't have to get married, right? There is the vocation of the single life, right? And if people want to be, really committed and not have to worry about children or whatever, then great, go be faithful workers in the world. We need those people as well. But if you choose by your own volition to get married, this is what it means. You are saying my primary relationship of love is with my spouse, and then secondarily with my children. Love Made Fruitful also has a good section talking about the elderly, and so the extended family. I felt fine putting my mom in there because she says that she's 80, so she says I'm elderly, and she's been saying that since she was like 40 or something. I'm an old woman now, so I don't feel any remorse about putting my mom in there as an example of the elderly and me embracing my mom. So we need a greater respect and understanding of. Here's a picture of my family. For some reason, we're doing jazz hands. I don't remember why that is. But this was at the celebration for my nephew's wedding at the day after kind of thing. And so my dad passed away in 2017. So just my mom and my brothers and sisters. And that's the the extended idea of what it means to have a family, to have brothers and sisters and all those things. But those are important relationships. And he says, I couldn't find where he says it, but we're not mandated to have big families, right? There's several reasons that people might have smaller families, right? But there is the benefit and the blessing if it's possible. Children are a gift, obviously, but it's also good to have family relationships. There's the stereotype, of course, of the only child syndrome, right? Or whatever, the spoiled or whatever, which is not always the case. But the good thing about brothers and sisters is they work on that relationship as well. The rubbing down and getting on each other's nerves and all those things. Those are all good things of growing in love and what that means and processing those things. So Love Made Fruitful has other effects as well. And it talks about the beauty of adoption as well. I don't have an adoption picture.
Sisters can also make you remain humble, which is a good thing.
Exactly. Why does, you know what? This has been up here the whole time.
It has something to do with your microphone being hooked up this
I
time.
don't think so. I was thinking the thing up top. I thought I could get that away, but I can't. Okay. Then chapter 7 talks about a better education of children. It talks quite a bit about technology and how that's a real thing going on. He uses the example of a family sitting around a table and they're all on their particular devices. I think we've all experienced that. I've gone over to, yeah, right. I think we all can be. And he's saying we need to be mindful of that. And the parents need to consider what they're allowing, who they're allowing to interact with their children. And lots of people are interacting with people on their phones and on their gaming systems and whatever. And those all need to be considered. And, another challenge that I've noticed just working with the Hispanic community is, the kids generally speak English. They speak some Spanish too, but they speak a lot more English than their parents do. And there was one time I was in the office at Our Lady of Unity, and this kid was watching some cartoon. It might have been Ninja Turtles or something. I don't know what it was, but there was all this really bad language going on, and sitting watching it on the tablet in the office, and the mother is sitting right there, and she's not saying anything because she doesn't know that's what's happening, right? Which is another particular complication, right? That this kid is listening to this thing at full blast. I'm like, Okay, kid, you got to turn that off. But she doesn't know. So just all those complications. Who are you inviting? It's particularly complicated if your children speak a different language than you do. So,
Good incentive for the parents to learn.
well, sure, it's a challenge though. As I can testify, it's a challenge to learn another language. The importance of correction. So I like this way they says that children who are corrected feel cared for, right? I'm not sure if I knew this at the time, but looking back on it, like a curfew is a sign of love, right? That means that your parents actually care about you. That they don't say whatever you want to do, give you total freedom, but they actually do care for me. My dad always waited up for me, so that was the other impetus to get in by midnight. Is my dad's not going to bed until I get in. So if I love my dad, I better get in because he's not going to bed until all of his kids are in the house. Yeah. So again, correction, rules, curfew. We talked, why always about rules? Well, rules are a sign of love too. And that's, as we hear in the Psalm, right? The law of the Lord is perfect, refreshing the soul. So laws are good for us. It means that our God loves us. And being corrected even by God is a sign that God loves us, right? That if we go into bad things, God loves us so much that he says to us, if we listen to him in our prayers, that he says, stop it. That's harmful. Don't do that. He also offers some thoughts about sex education in the family as well. So I thought that was very appropriate and very good to consider because there's all kinds of things, again, about inviting what's coming into your house. And we need to have a proper sex education. And he talks about, it's not about safe sex. It's about talking about being responsible and being prepared and what that all means and how do you express those things in a loving way to prepare yourself for a faithful, fruitful marriage one day, if that's what God is calling you to. And then Bishop Barron talks about this as well in this other video about the chapter 7 is what the studies say over and over again. If the faith is practiced at the home and continue to practice, people are going to be practicing it as they get older. Not always the case, but that is a good indicator. The odds are way higher if the faith was practiced faithfully, continued to be practiced faithfully. Now, there's all kinds of exceptions, of course. Not all my siblings are faithful practicing Catholics. I love all my siblings, but yeah, all of my sisters and I, but my brother is very involved in his Christian church, and my other brother, I don't know what he does. But so I think that causes my mom great pain now. And I know that causes particularly moms and fathers great pain. So, so like, what did I do wrong? And it's not always something you did wrong, right? But sometimes it could be some things there too, but I don't want to put any guilt trips on anything, but I think that my mom does wrestle with that of, what did I do? And could I have done anything differently? And those are natural questions to ask, not necessarily helpful, but natural. But it is just a call for us. We can't change the past. We can do what we're doing now and form our children well. That's what he's trying to do for the families coming up. All right, almost done. Sorry, I went a little bit long today. But chapter 1, so I'm going in this really random order, but chapter 1, pretty brief chapter. It just kind of gives a summary of marriage and the family and how the family has played a role in all of Scripture. It's beautiful. It's good. It's probably the least interesting chapter, to be quite honest, of the document, because it's a lot of stuff. Yeah, I know that. That's how this happens. But it's a good recap too. And then this idea of having the icon of the Holy Family to help them and to remind them of this love that happens. The icon of the Holy Family is, of course, an icon of the Trinity, this model of love of the family. Chapter 3 gives a summary of the teaching about the family, and he uses a bunch of documents as well. So a little bit of scripture, but also he talks about all these other documents that have come up and have kind of set the groundwork for where this is. Familiaris Consortio, that's one by John Paul II. That again, Father Ashmore said that this one, he wasn't sure what more this one offered, the Familiaris Consortio. Now I need to read Familiaris Consortio because I need to remind myself what John Paul II said about that. And then just also Benedict XVI. So again, Pope Francis does not stand on his own. He's building on all these building blocks. People sometimes think, okay, the church was not faithful, and now finally we're talking about love and all these things. But no, he's saying, look, I'm building on what we've already been doing, what we've been saying this whole time. So, and then a lot about sacramental theology. So it gives kind of chapter 3 gives a summary of where we have been. Again, I don't find that to be the most interesting chapter because reading brief summaries of other things is not, I don't think, particularly interesting. So I wouldn't say chapter 1 or chapter 3 are the most interesting, and I wouldn't spend a whole lot of time in those. I would dive right in chapter 4. Chapter 2 was about those problems. And then, sometimes people think that, Pope Francis just poo-pooing Humanae Vitae, it's a controversial document. Like, oh, but nope, we're done with that. No, he's not. He said we should read this because there's lots of good stuff in there. So, and then chapter 9 again talks about the spirituality of marriage and the family, and that the family should be together and pray together, growth in the sacraments, growth in the Eucharist, all those things which help to build the family. So that's a summary of Amoris Laetitia. Hopefully that has been helpful. And then we'll offer some time for conversation as well. Next week is Fratelli Tutti, and I've got to do a lot of reading on that one as well to prepare for that for next week. So with that then, are there any questions, concerns? We've talked about some things already, but I see you on the Facebook as well. If you have any questions there, if you've got anything in the chat, I can look up in the chat there. Any questions, concerns?
The church has made alterations to their various rules over the years. And it's interesting when you put these things all together that we're responsible for taking care of God's creation, for taking care of the world. Around the 50s and 60s, we had a great movement to